So how can three warlords from 16th century Japan give us a leadership framework for 2026? I know it sounds kind of out there, like some weird history lesson, but stick with me, because the answer is actually a brutally practical guide for leading in the age of AI. We're about to decode how the philosophies of Japan's three great unifiers, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, are really just three different, incredibly powerful operating systems for leadership. Okay, let's dive right in.
It all starts with this classic Japanese thought experiment. See, these three guys were once asked a question. The problem was this: what do you do with a cuckoo that just won't sing? Oda Nobunaga, the ruthless innovator, his take was simple: kill it. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the master persuader, he had a totally different vibe: I'll make it want to sing. And then there was Tokugawa Ieyasu, the patient strategist, who said, I'll wait for it. Now, these aren't just cute little poems. No way. They are a direct window into three radically different ways of thinking about power, ambition, and getting things done.
But let's bring this into our world, right now in 2026. What if that cuckoo isn't a bird at all? What if it's your top engineering team and they're digging in their heels on a new project? Or maybe it's a legacy market that refuses to adopt your new tech? Or that huge project that's just dead in the water? All of a sudden, this old riddle is a real, high-stakes problem you might be facing right now. And those three answers, they become three distinct operating systems for leadership, each one built for a different, critical phase of a company's life. And today, you got to be fluent in all three.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by decoding that Cuckoo cipher. Then, we're going to do a deep dive on Nobunaga as the founder OS, Hideyoshi as the scaling OS, and Ieyasu as the legacy OS. Then we'll pull it all together into a unified model for the AI era, and finally, give you a way to diagnose which OS your own team needs right now. Sound good? Let's go. All right, first up, Oda Nobunaga. They called him the Demon King for a reason. He was the ultimate disruptor. We're calling his style the Founder OS. This is the operating system you have to run to take something, a company, an idea, a nation, from 0 to 1. We're talking radical, foundational, sometimes even violent change. Now, to really get what made Nobunaga tick, we gotta borrow a term from the tech world. You've probably heard of it: founder mode. It comes from Paul Graham at Y Combinator. It's that state of insane, singular focus, where a leader's vision is so intense, they just break all the rules to make something happen. You know the type, right? The person who personally codes the prototype, designs the first flyers, and makes the first 100 sales calls themselves. Well, for Nobunaga, that wasn't just a phase. That was his permanent reality. And this is where it gets crazy, because look how shockingly modern his strategies were. Take Rakuichi Rakuza. He basically smashed the existing monopolies held by guilds and temples to create free and open markets. I mean, that's the 16th century playbook for an Amazon-style platform economy. Then there's Haino Bunri, even wilder. He separated warriors from farmers, creating Japan's first professional, full-time army. He turned the gig economy of part-time soldiers into a dedicated specialist workforce, which gave him a huge edge. But his boldest move? Pure radical meritocracy. He couldn't care less about your family name. He promoted a guy named Hideyoshi who started out carrying his sandals, all because the guy got results. That's literally the talent density playbook from Netflix today. Hire the best, period.
So, the upside to this OS: blazing speed and a team of absolute killers. What's not to love? Well, the downside is catastrophic. Under Nobunaga, there was absolutely zero psychological safety. He took one of his most successful generals, a guy who'd served him loyally for decades, and publicly humiliated and exiled him just for not meeting his impossible standards. So everyone lived in constant fear, not just of failing, but of not being successful enough. And here's the key takeaway: his downfall wasn't an accident. The Honnōji incident, where his own general betrayed him, that was the system eating itself alive. The Founder OS burns incredibly bright, but man, it is always on the verge of a total spectacular flameout.
Okay, so that leads us perfectly to his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. If Nobunaga was the guy who went from 0 to 1, Hideyoshi was the undisputed master of going from 1 to 100. We're talking hypergrowth. This is our scaling OS. It's not about inventing the new thing, it's about making that new thing take over the entire world.
And again, we have a perfect modern term for this: Blitzscaling, a concept from Reid Hoffman. It's that all-out sprint where you prioritize speed over everything else. You burn through cash, you burn through resources at a scary rate, all to grab massive market share before your rivals can even blink. And Hideyoshi? He was the original blitzscaler. He wasn't playing for small wins. He was trying to conquer the entire Japanese market in a single generation.
Just look at his methods. It's brilliant. The famous siege of Adawara?
That wasn't really a battle. It was more like a VC roadshow on steroids. He showed up with an army of over 200,000 soldiers, not to fight, but basically to flex so hard that the other side would just give up. He even brought merchants, entertainers, and his golden tea room to the war camp. That's like raising $1 billion funding round just to show your competitors you can't be beaten. And that tea room? That's just genius strategic branding. It was a traveling billboard of power meant to wow his friends and terrify his enemies. Then you've got his katana gereri, or sword hunt. He disarmed the entire peasantry. It was a masterstroke in de-risking his user base, making sure that once he won, nobody could challenge him.
So the scaling OS is terrifyingly effective. Hideyoshi basically created network effects, making his alliance the only game in town. He was a genius at motivating people with rewards, land, titles, gold, not just the fear that Nobunaga used. But, and this is a huge but, the whole thing was built on him, his personality, his charisma, his deal-making. This created a massive key person risk, and that was his fatal flaw, a catastrophic failure in succession planning. He was so obsessed with his own son inheriting everything that he brutally purged his perfectly capable adopted heir and his entire family. So when Hideyoshi died, guess what? There was nobody left who could run the show. The entire empire was built on one man's charisma, and when he was gone, it all just fell apart.
And that brings us to our third and final unifier, Tokugawa Ieyasu. So, we've had the destructive fire of Nobunaga and the explosive growth of Hideyoshi. Ieyasu's game was completely different. He wasn't thinking about disruption or crazy expansion. He was thinking about one thing: permanence. This is the Legacy OS, the system you build to go from 100 to, well, infinity.
You can think of Ieyasu as the ultimate systems architect. His genius wasn't about being the flashiest guy on the battlefield. It was about designing durable systems, structures, processes, rules that would function long after he was gone. He shifted the basis of power from a charismatic personality to an unshakable system. It's honestly the perfect parallel for how Tim Cook took over from Steve Jobs at Apple. He didn't try to be another Steve. Instead, he built a world-class operational machine that made Apple's success repeatable and scalable.
And all his policies were laser-focused on building this foundation. The Bakuhan system? That was basically a super stable, decentralized corporate structure that brilliantly balanced central power with regional autonomy. His Buke Shohato, the laws for the military houses, you can just think of that as the ultimate corporate compliance policy. Here are the rules, everybody follows them, end of story. And moving the capital to Edo, which is now Tokyo, that was like building a brand new corporate HQ from scratch, far away from all the old politics and baggage. A totally fresh start.
Which brings us full circle back to his famous Cuckoo poem. If the cuckoo does not sing, wait for it. Now, so many people hear that and they think, oh, he was passive, weak even. But that is a total misread. It completely misses the cold, calculating genius of what he was actually saying.
Okay, this is the key. Waiting wasn't passive at all. It was active, data-driven risk management. While his rivals were burning through their resources and manpower, like Hideyoshi's disastrous invasions of Korea, Ieyasu just patiently preserved his strength. He waited for the opportune moment, when his data showed his position was strongest and his rivals were weakest, to make his single, decisive move. It's the patience of a chess grandmaster who knows that victory isn't about making the most moves, but about making the right move at exactly the right time.
And you can't argue with the results. I mean, the Legacy OS delivered over 250 years of peace and stability. That's almost unheard of in human history. The system was brilliant at managing risk and resources. But, as always, its greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. The system became prone to stagnation, bureaucracy, and a rigid structure that actively stifled the very disruptive innovation that allowed Nobunaga to rise in the first place.
Okay, so this is where we pull it all together. This is the big so what. How do we take these three totally different operating systems from history and forge them into one single unified model for leaders today? Especially, and this is the important part, as we enter an era where our most productive team members might actually be AI agents?
All right, here it is, the core idea of this whole explainer. That entire life cycle, from disruption to scaling to stabilization, that took these guys nearly 50 years to complete. A company today can go through that in 5 years, maybe less. AI and other technologies are just compressing time itself. You can go from being the hot new startup to the global leader to the legacy incumbent facing disruption at this absolutely terrifying speed.
So what does that mean? It means you can't afford to be just one of these guys anymore. You have to run an integrated, unified OS that's capable of switching between modes. As AI agents start to handle more of the logic, the execution, and the data analysis, the uniquely human skills become everything. You need the world-breaking vision of Nobunaga to set a mission that challenges the status quo. You need the magnetic charisma of Hideyoshi to get human talent and investors to rally behind you. And you need the strategic foresight of Ieyasu to build a system and a culture that can outlast you. Vision, persuasion, and system design. That's the irreplaceable job of a human leader in the age of AI.
So let's make this personal. Let's talk about you. Now that you understand the 3 core operating systems, it's time to diagnose your own leadership phase. It's time to think critically about updating your OS.
Ask yourself this simple but profound question. Look honestly at your team, your company, your project. What does it need most right now to survive and thrive? Does it need the creative destruction of Nobunaga's fire to break free from stagnation? Does it need the rapid expansion fueled by Hideyoshi's gold to capture a fleeting market opportunity? Or does it need the patient institution building of Ieyasu's time to consolidate gains and build for the long term?
Look, the ultimate takeaway here is that leadership isn't a static trait. It is a dynamic, adaptive process. The greatest leaders are the ones who can accurately assess their organization's phase, identify which operating system the moment demands, and then consciously adapt their style to lead effectively. The strategies of 16th century warlords don't just teach us about a bygone era. They provide a timeless map for leading through radical uncertainty. The only question left is, which OS do you need to install today?